All right, so welcome everyone to our meet and greet with Professor Don Barrie, Professor of Physical Sciences at San Diego Mesa College. Excited to have him here, and we'll be discussing today, as well as our check-in meeting in December, just some general questions about, why choose teaching science as a profession. So hopefully this conversation will help clarify some questions that you may have and may help inspire you to choose that, teaching science as a profession. So welcome, Don. It seems like we have like this podcasting going.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Moment. But thanks for joining us. So I guess our first question is, what prompted you to pursue geology or science as a major in college?
It was a number of things. And I have to say, I actually started out in engineering, and boy, was that a disaster. My father was a civil engineer. And so, I always liked science in high school, not so much math. I kind of have always struggled with math, but I got through it and, did okay in high school. So it was just logical to, I think, sort of follow in my dad's footsteps. But I realized very quickly once I got to UCSD that I was kind of out of my league, and I really wasn't motivated to kind of pursue an engineering track. But I think it was fall quarter of my sophomore year, I took a geology course, and that really changed my life. Something just clicked, and I think I knew before I even finished the course that I wanted to work in geoscience. So I really spent my first year in college just kind of floundering, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until that second year that I kind of found my passion and found some direction. So
did you start at a UC when you went to college? Did you go to a community college and then transfer, or did you start at UCSD?
No, that's an interesting question. I went straight to UCSD from high school. And I was always a good student in high school, one of the better ones, and got good grades in physics and math and chemistry. But boy, I have to say, in hindsight, I was completely unprepared for the jump from high school to college level math and science. In hindsight, I think a community college would have been much better for me. So I think that was part of the reason why I kind of floundered my first year. And at the time, UCSD didn't have a geology major, so I ended up transferring to a state school, to Humboldt State University, and got my bachelor's degree in geology there, and then went straight to New Mexico Tech in Socorro, New Mexico for my master's, and then went straight from there into industry. So teaching is really a second career for me. I spent a number of years, working professionally in industry before I got into education.
And what was that tipping point? What prompted you to go from tech industry to teaching?
Well, that's another interesting story. I was kind of reflecting on my path, before we met today. And at the time, I was working at a local environmental consulting firm here in town in San Diego as a staff geologist. And my firm kind of adopted a local middle school, and they needed kind of a token geologist to go with them on a 3-day trip to northern Arizona and the Grand Canyon. So I thought that sounded pretty fun. And I had a ball. I would hold up a rock and have the rapt attention of 60 middle schoolers. It was really fun, and just kind of hanging out with the teachers and getting to talk to the students, and so I think that was kind of a seminal experience. It got me thinking about the possibility of transitioning into education. And for a while, I thought about becoming a high school teacher, and looked into that a little bit. And I was actually just having lunch with a friend one day, and was kind of saying, well, I think I might want to pursue education. I'm not really how to do that. And he said, well, you have a master's, don't you? And, I did. He said, why don't you just call around some colleges? You can certainly teach with a master's. And so I did, and surprisingly got hired to be a part-time instructor, what we call an adjunct at a couple of different schools. And so really from there, I never looked back. Once I started teaching, I really, I had this sort of deep sense of calling, a deep sense of purpose that this was really, the kind of my passion.
Right, and many people find so much, pleasure in finding that, that perfect connection when you see that you do something for a living where you don't feel like you need to get paid for it. That's, that is really super fulfilling. And I think in many ways, when teachers describe their profession, that's what they liken it to. They say, we do this because we find that it's a calling, rather than it's like a backup plan. Right?
Very, very much so. Yeah, very much so in my case.
So
Absolutely.
why college teaching and not middle school or high school teaching? Did you have trouble choosing, or did you go straight to college teaching?
I think one reason, ironically, it was a little bit of an easier path for me.
Hmm.
So, as you know, to teach at the community college level, you just need a master's. And beyond that, you don't really need a credential, just a master's in your discipline of specialty. So my thought was to maybe start there and see how it went. And it turned out it's really a great population. I really you just have a passion for working with community college students and the unique challenges that they have and the unique perspectives. I think I'm trying to think. I think another reason is it. I ended up taking a couple of community college classes at around the same time I was kind of making this career transition. And just watching the instructor up front, who was about my age or even a little younger, and just kind of thinking to myself, I could do this. And so I think that for me, that was a good example of experiential learning, learning outside the classroom. So it wasn't that I read something in a book ultimately that enabled me to find my calling. It was that I was sort of out gathering knowledge and learning, in the real world that kind of led to a change of perspective for me.
Well, and you mentioned something, you touched upon a point that many students don't consider or think it's outside of their scope, which is to go to graduate school and get a master's degree, because that ultimately does open so many doors. I also don't have a teaching credential, but I taught also for about 15 years. I taught Spanish at Mesa for 15 years. So, but once you get a master's or a PhD, it opens up so many doors. But yet students who want to stop and get a terminal degree at the bachelor's level, what advice do you have for them if they're interested in teaching?
I would probably say keep going. Mm-hmm. You said it really nicely, Letty, that going to graduate school just opens up so many doors. And in hindsight, I'm really glad I did. And in my case, teaching came later in life. I was 40 years old before I decided to go into teaching. So for me, the decision to go to graduate school was more about sort of preparing for a career in industry. And these days, at least in my field in industry, the standard professional degree is increasingly becoming a master's degree. So, I just decided to kind of power through for another couple of more years. And in hindsight, that was a good decision. It enabled me to start my career after my formal education at a little bit higher of a salary. And like you say, even more than the salary, it just opens up doors. Having some kind of a graduate degree creates opportunities that aren't necessarily there if you only have a bachelor's.
Right. Yeah, and that I know it's a long-term vision. It's not. It's tough to tell a student, who you see is struggling through math or through like you, or through other classes, when they want to get to that, ultimately to that major, to get a degree in chemistry or to get a degree in biology, yet they have a few roadblocks in the way that are quite often are math. You know, it's I don't know, what tips do you have for students to persist, you know, in their undergraduate classes? Because once you get to graduate school, you know, we don't have there's no more testing. It's all
Right,
about
right.
the experience. It's writing the papers, it's writing the thesis or the doctoral dissertation, right? But those students who are just now in, you know, in the throes of, you know, midterms and not really seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, where they say, how am I ever going to graduate with this if I can't pass statistics, or if I have trouble, you know, with other classes? So what tips do you have?
Yeah, I think you mentioned something. Persistence is key, and just speaking candidly, uh, I failed second semester calculus and second semester physics,
Mm.
and so I just retook the classes. And you know, I think if I could give students advice, no one cares if you have to retake a class. It happens to most of us probably that at some point we have to retake a class, and that was it. I knew at that point that I wanted to do something in science, although I was still in engineering at the time. Even then, even by second quarter, you know, it was clear that engineering maybe wasn't the right choice for me. But I knew I wanted to do something in STEM, and I knew that these classes were necessary, regardless of whether I really enjoyed them at the time or not. And so, yeah, I just decided to power through. I took summer school after both my freshman and sophomore year. It's a great way to, kind of catch up a little bit. I think the other advice I would give is I think most people spend their first year in college learning how to study and learning how to write. That's certainly the case for me. And I'm someone that was a good student in high school, so it was kind of a shock to realize that I needed to really improve my study skills and my writing skills. That's what the first year of college was really about for me, more so than formal academic success. But once I kind of figured that out, then college became easier. And I'm really convinced that most classes are designed so that if you're persistent and you take them seriously and you devote enough time on task, that they're passable. They may not be easy, but they're doable. And even if they're not, you can always retake it. So I guess I would say, just to kind of circle back around, think about what your goal is, and use that motivation to help get you through whatever you need to do, and realize, for every 2 steps forward, you might take a half a step or a step backwards. That's all part of the path. Almost no one, I think, takes a completely linear path, from where they begin college to their life's passion. That certainly wasn't the case for me. But I think sometimes those can be really important learning experience as well. In hindsight, like if I reflect back on my now long professional career, it really wasn't the successes that meant the most. It was frankly the failures. I learned far more from my failures than my successes. And it kind of sounds trite to say that our failures build character, but just in speaking about my own pathway, I think they really did. I learned, for example, I kind of chuckle now, but what do you know? If you don't attend chemistry class all semester and show up for the final, you're probably not going to pass. At the time, though, that was kind of a revelation for me, because no one was forcing me to attend lecture. I just kind of attended when I could, and it was mildly interesting, and thought I could squeak by, on the final. And what do you know? I didn't. So that was a real wake-up call. And I don't know that I could have learned that lesson had I, been completely successful from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, great takeaways and gems there, because with the independence that going to college brings, which is you're on your own and you attend if you want, you don't if you don't want, you take the test, or in this virtual environment, you consult materials that you really shouldn't be consulting if it's a testing environment, right? So we have to be, mindful of that not only are we cheating our own experience of learning, within that environment, but also our long-term experience with it, so but yeah, no, great tips. Also, we have a great resource in the Virtual STEM Center with the peer mentors and the tutors
Very
available
true.
virtually. They also, many of the tutors meet students where they're at. So they have that differentiated learning set up. So it's not all at one student's pace, if it's a group of 5, the students learn and absorb the material at different paces. So the tutors are trained to meet the students where they're at. So we have incredible sources at Mesa. So thank you also for telling your students about that. We definitely would want to continue the conversation in December when we find a date when we can actually have the students to do the Q&As with you. But this will generally, get them started, get them thinking about possible questions that they can ask you directly, even if it is questions that we receive over the course of the month that we can then put in the chat for you to respond to. But this is generally just the start of hopefully many conversations that we'll have with multiple faculty in your school and in other schools, so business technology, computer science, and psychology. But with that, any closing words as a send off to students, and maybe even a time here to plug your classes for spring, because I know the spring schedule is coming out.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that reminder. To anyone who's listening or watching this, I would love to have you in my Geology 100 lecture or Geology 101 lab course. Please sign up. You'll become more literate in terms of how the Earth works. So please join me. I think my parting words would be look for insight, look for education outside as well as inside of the classroom. I think some of my most valuable life lessons and lessons about education actually happened in experiences and interactions that I took advantage of outside the classroom versus just the formal classroom environment, like peer mentoring, for example. Those sorts of extracurricular activities, they can completely change the course of your life if you take advantage of them.
And that's the beauty of college learning. It's learning not just what's in the textbook. It's going on those field trips with you that you lead. Are you still leading the trips to Arizona for students and to Hawaii, or well, not now during COVID, but
not so much Arizona and Hawaii, but Iceland.
Okay.
So I do trips to Iceland now in the summer, and that's pretty fun. Yeah, it's great to be able to watch students take things they're learning in the classroom and apply it to someplace far away and exotic.
Awesome. So see, I think the promo tagline will now be a geology teacher. Follow in the footsteps of
Great.
Professor Barrie. Well, thank you, Don. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure to talk to you, Letty.
Now, and we'll see you later.